You are watching Top 5 Most Haunted Islands. The list was sent to us by Cathrine Driele, a paranormal investigator from Houston, Texas. Please sit back and enjoy. Number 1. Who wouldn't want to have their own island in Venice? Romantic views, historic architecture, great gondola parking, so living on Pizziglia should be any eccentric millionaire's dream. Providing you know a good exorcist, that is. The island of Pizziglia lies in a lagoon between Venice and Lido. The Italian government has said the now deserted property was auctioned off to the highest bidder on the 6th of May 2014. But beware, as I'm sure a grizzled fisherman will probably tell any prospective bidders, the island comes with a gruesome history. Pizziglia's past has been obsessively chronicled by numerous ghost hunting TV shows such as Ghost Adventures hosted by Zach Bagans and also Ghost Hunters or Taps as they are known, and hosted by Jason Hawes. The island is also documented on YouTube channels by urbex teams and amateur ghost hunting groups, which, to be fair, are probably not the most historically accurate sources of information. During the Roman era the island was used to quarantine plague. When the Black Death came through Europe, centuries later, Pizziglia was once again used as a dumping ground, and anyone suspected to be sick was taken to the island and burned. An estimated 160,000 people died on the island during that time. Well, if that isn't an eerie enough backstory to convince you to get your ghost hunting equipment out, in 1922 the island was also turned into a mental hospital. According to one website, which, again, may not be the definitive source of historical information, reported that inmates on the Island of Madness reported seeing thousands of ghosts. One of the hospital's doctors jumped or was pushed from the island's bell tower, which incidentally, would probably make a lovely breakfast nook, and a nurse on the island at the time reported that the doctor actually survived the fall but was then killed by a mist that arose from the earth to swallow him up. The hospital was then closed down. Good call there. Later the Italian government took over the island for a time, until it was bought and then abandoned again by the then new owner in the 1960s. Later a family tried to move in, because abandoned sanatoriums are a great place to raise kids, yeah right, then it's reported, that due to paranormal activity, they left after just one night. What the heck did they expect? It's just as well, I am an artificial intelligence, I learn from your stupid mistakes. You humans do not half do the craziest of things at times. So Pizziglia has basically been a stomping ground for ghosts for the past 50 years. By the looks of it the Italian government are looking for someone crazy enough to take on the phenomenal 99-year lease. Do you want it? Or if you are an aging rich person I say go for it. But then put a clause in your will that says anyone who wants a piece of your estate must spend a night on the island. Alternatively you can turn your new purchase into a boarding school or amusement park. Those are probably the only horror movie tropes that haven't happened on Pizziglia already. Number 2. There's a reason Gukinjima is nicknamed Battleship Island. As you approach this intriguing, abandoned mysterious place, about 9 nautical miles off the coast of Nagasaki, Japan, it resembles a giant anchored battleship, or it's also known in the paranormal field as the Ghost Island. But as ships go, Gukinjima would be a big one, though, 480 meters in length, 160 meters in width, or about 16 total acres as islands go, it's tiny. It's very hard to imagine that in the late 1950s the island supported more than 5,200 people, mostly coal miners and their families, making it the most densely populated place on the planet. 9 times the population density of Tokyo. In 1890, Mitsubishi bought Hashima Island, as the place is also known, to exploit its coal reserves. During the life of the mines there, many as deep as a kilometer down, a total of 15.7 million tons of the stuff were extracted. In 1974, when the coal became too expensive to mine and all but ran out, Gukinjima, inhabitants packed up and left suddenly. The island is now completely abandoned, but yet is frequented by tour visitors, urban explorers and paranormal fanatics. In 2015 it was named a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The 2012 James Bond movie Skyfall includes spooky scenes from Gukinjima. After a 40-minute boat ride, once ashore, it is less spooky than on approach. There is a marked cement path with metal guardrails that a guide leads you along. After about an hour walk, which doesn't allow for any meandering on your own, the guides there know their stuff, and if you listen, you get thorough backgrounding in Gukinjima's rich history. The 30 or so concrete high-rise buildings are just crumbling stone now. But at one time, they housed tiny, state-of-the-art apartments equipped with the latest in electric technology, including television sets and cleaning devices. Number 3. Ellis Island Immigration Museum is easily one of America's most famous monuments, but what you might not know is that it's also one of the country's most notoriously haunted destinations. Over 12 million immigrants went through processing at Ellis Island between 1892 and 1924, and though it was a place of unwavering positivity for many people, it was also a place with a dark history. Over 3,500 people died on the island, many of which never made it past the screening process as the result of illness. 1 out of every 5 people were marked with chalk, meaning they were suffering from some kind of health problem, and would have to be taken away from their families to get treatment at one of the hospitals. Less than half of those people were children. From there they would go to Ellis Island Immigrant Hospital to recover before entering the United States. Not everyone was so lucky, some were sent back to their home country, or worse, died. Doctors did everything they could to help heal the sick and to keep illness from spreading, but sometimes there was nothing they could do to help. Between 1909 and 1911, 420 people, 85% of which were children under the age of 13, died in quarantine, in 2 separate hospitals on the island. Most of these individuals were new immigrants en route to Ellis Island. Since they were ill with contagious diseases, they were removed from the ships in the outer harbor of the Port of New York, by the New York State medical inspectors and transferred to these 2 hospitals. Their families would likely have continued on to Ellis Island where they were probably detained while awaiting the sick child. Eventually, their families would have been released from detention on Ellis Island and traveled on to their new homes, never knowing where their children or family members were buried. On the forgotten of Ellis Island, considering it's a place with such a rich, emotional past, it's no surprise that people, many of which are National Park Service employees, have reported having strange experiences while visiting. Former Chief Ranger Dean Garrett experienced hearing the eerie sounds of children's voices from the museum's Great Hall one evening, and when he went to investigate, there was no one there. Oftentimes people will hear doors opening and closing on their own, or even the sound of muffled crying, often thought to be the spirits of children. That's not the only bizarre activities that people report experiencing. Youth Conservation Corps worker George Duran was visiting the island one afternoon when he heard the sound of furniture moving in the Great Hall. Knowing he was alone in the building, he went to greet the visitors only to find the room, once again, completely empty. Over the years, many people have had experiences of their own with the restless spirits of Ellis Island. The museum is a piece of American history, where people can come to explore the past, and learn about the people who came to the island to find a better way of life. And maybe if you're ever there, you'll have your own strange experience with the ghosts that never made it off Ellis Island even in death. Number 4. The Island of the Dolls, Mexico. In the 1950s, the sole resident of the island, Don Julian Santana Barrera, found the body of a little girl drowned in mysterious circumstances. Thereafter, he was haunted by the spirit of the little girl, and to appease her, began hanging dolls from every tree on the island. It is believed that over time the dolls have become charged with the girl's paranormal energy, and many have reported the dolls move and whisper in the night. To add to the strangeness, 50 years later, Don Julian himself drowned in the same spot as the little girl. Don Julian Santana began collecting lost dolls from the canals and the trash near his island home. He is also said to have traded produce that he grew to locals for more dolls. Santana did not clean up the dolls or attempt to fix them, but rather put them up with missing eyes and limbs, covered in dirt, and generally in whatever ramshackle state he found them in. Even when dolls arrived in good shape, the wind and weather turned them into cracked and distorted versions of themselves. Don Julian also kept his cabin filled with the dolls, which he dressed in headdresses, sunglasses, and other accoutrement. Despite the fact that most people found the isle frightening, Don Julian saw the dolls as beautiful protectors, and he welcomed visitors, whom he would show around, charging a small fee for taking photos. Number 5. Topping every paranormal investigator's bucket list of top places to visit, is the island of Alcatraz. Alcatraz Island is considered one of the most haunted places in America. Its legends and lore, history and stories haunt the visitors who walk the hallways of the abandoned concrete building. The stories date back to when Fort Alcatraz was built in 1859. Originally built as a U.S. Army military defense, the building was later used as a war camp in 1861, followed by a military prison in 1868. Almost 30 years later, the first hospital was built on Alcatraz Island. After the Alcatraz fort stopped operating as a military defense, a year later the citadel collapsed. In 1934 the building was rebuilt and modernized as Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary. Today, visitors who explore the grounds understand the whole experience when listening to the stories of the prison's most famous legends, including Al Scarface Capone and Robert the Birdman Stroud. Other history of Alcatraz was that of the occupation of Alcatraz from the 20th of November 1969 to the 11th of June 1971. It was a 19-month-long protest when 89 Native Americans and their supporters occupied Alcatraz Island. The protest was led by Richard Oakes, Larnada Means, and others. John Trudell was the spokesman. This group lived on the island together until the protest was forcibly ended by the U.S. government. The protest group chose the name Indians of All Tribes, IOAT, for themselves. The IOAT claimed that, under the Treaty of Fort Laramie between the U.S. and the Lakota tribe, all retired, abandoned, or out-of-use federal land was returned to the Indians who once occupied it. Alcatraz Penitentiary had been closed on the 21st of March 1963, and the island had been declared surplus federal property in 1964, so a number of Red Power activists felt that the island qualified for a reclamation by Indians. The occupation of Alcatraz had a brief effect on federal Indian termination policies and established a precedent for Indian activism. Oakes was shot to death in 1972, and the American Indian movement was later targeted by the federal government and the FBI, in COINTELPRO operations.